What is going on, my fellow movie nerds and geeks alike? There's a Friday the 13th in December this year. Now, if you are familiar with the channel or familiar with me in general, I've always been a huge fan of Friday the 13th. As far as horror franchises go, it is my favorite of the bunch. I like every single one of the movies, even when they're terrible. I guess it could have something to do with the fact that I'm from New Jersey, and technically, Jason is also from New Jersey. If you'd like to see some of our other Friday the 13th videos, I will leave links to those videos in the description below. We did a really fun live stream where we ranked all the movies. I went over my huge Jason Voorhees Friday the 13th collection in one video, and then in another video I showed off my machete that's signed by everyone who's ever played Jason. But today I'm doing something a little different. I am going to be ranking all the looks of Jason Voorhees in the movies, from my least favorite to my most favorite. This is really just an opinionated piece on what I think of the look of Jason. It has nothing to do with the movies themselves. Happy Friday the 13th to you, if you're celebrating, of course, and let's get into this list. My least favorite look of Jason Voorhees is in Freddy vs. Jason. This one obviously was directed by Ronnie Yu, who wanted a very different look for Jason. He wanted him to be big and tall and gigantic. And the reason why I don't particularly like the way Jason looks in this film is because he's kind of portrayed to be almost like a Frankenstein. He's wearing like platform shoes, he's all black, he's just too big in my opinion. Now I get the vision, Ronnie Yu wanted him to be giant and way bigger than Freddy, but I think the fact that Ken Kirzinger, who played Jason, played him as like this almost sympathetic character, much like Frankenstein himself, kind of turned me off. Jason's supposed to be a scary killer, alright? He's not supposed to be this sympathetic guy. But anyway, the look's not terrible, I just don't care for it. He's too big, he's too lumbering, and he's just, frankly, too Frankenstein. So that's why he's my number 15 on this list. And my number 14 on this list is Jason in Jason X. Now, not cybernetic Jason, I'm talking pre-Uber Jason, just the regular old Jason. He's obviously played by Kane Hodder in this one, and I don't hate the look at all, I just think it's kind of a lazy look. Like, you could almost see, like, Kane Hodder's, like, hairline and stuff through the hood behind the mask in this one, and the mask in this one is also kind of just, like, oddly shaped. It has a very weird nose. I don't particularly like it, and the costume design just is kind of a little lazy is all. So, that's why this one ended on my number 14 spot. And my number 13 position goes to, ironically, Uber Jason from Jason X. Now, I know fans are mixed on this movie in general. I have grown to love it over time. I think it's goofy, it's silly, and it's so over the top that I just love it now. When I first saw it in the movie theater, I didn't really care for it either. But we're talking about Uber Jason here. How can you not love a giant mechanical machine Terminator like Jason Voorhees? Yes, it's weird that they only have like almost half his body with like the metal pieces and stuff, and it does look like a giant hunk of plastic at the end of the day, but it's cool enough. And I mean, I put it here ahead of the regular Jason because I just think it's fascinating, and that's why it's number 13 on my list. And at number 12 on my list, we have the look of Jason Voorhees as a young boy from the original Friday the 13th. Now, I almost put this one dead last just because Jason doesn't really have much to do in the original Friday the 13th. He's just the young kid who drowned in the lake and why his mom went on this crazy killing spree in the original film. But we do get a good look at him as the like almost deformed boy popping out of the lake in that shock ending, of course. But it's really just a kid with a dilapidated head. Tom Savini did a great job on the special effects, and Lehmann did a great job as the little boy in this film, but he just doesn't do much, so that's why it ended up at my number 12, but realistically, it could end up even further down the list if on any given day. And number 11 on my list is the remake Jason from the Friday the 13th 2009 remake. He is, of course, played by Derek Mears in this one. The reason I put this one at number 11 is just mainly because, like, I like the movie fine, but the mask is a little weird to me. It doesn't look too similar to the original, but it's just like a little small on his head. I didn't really like the hair coming off Jason. I didn't like that he's wearing this like almost like Urban Outfitters style coat. I did love that he was like a huntsman and a woodsman and had like the underground tunnels in the film. I don't hate it at all by any means. I think Derek Mears did a great job as Jason in this film. I just think he was scarier in the beginning of the film before he got the hockey mask. So I kind of like almost preferred him before he slipped on the mask. Anyway, that's why it ended up in this spot. And number 10 on my look of Jason Voorhees ranking list is the remake as well, 2009's Friday the 13th, but I'm talking about Sackhead Jason before he finds the mask. That opening sequence when he is killing America Olivio and just killing the dude who's listening to White Ranger, it is terrifying. And I think that's why I prefer it to the other Jason, because it's just scary, man. Something about wearing like a sack over your head is just much scarier. I don't know, but that's why it ended up ahead of the regular version of Jason. In my opinion, of course, you could think otherwise. This is just my list, so that's where it ended up. And number 9 on my list goes to Jason from Jason Goes to Hell. He's obviously played by Kane Hodder once again in Jason Goes to Hell. I actually really like the look of Jason in this film. Granted, you don't really get to see the full body Jason a lot in the movie at all, because this movie itself essentially is just like a remake of The Hidden. You only see Jason in the beginning and at the very end, but I love the look of him. I just wish we got more of him. But he's got like almost like radioactive like bubbles coming out of his head, and he like almost is just super deformed and just like covered in bullet holes and wounds. And I love that that is how he looks in this film. I just wish we saw him more. Granted, we didn't get that, but I think he still looks awesome. I know a lot of people don't care for it, but I love the like almost zombie radioactive look of his skin and stuff in this one. So that's why it ended up here. And number 8 on my list goes to Warrington, Gillette, and Steve Dash, who played Sackhead Jason in Friday the 13th Part 2. Like I was talking about with the remake, which was a little earlier in this list. The sack is just a scary mask for a killer to use. Granted, it's been done to death these days, but I love how Jason is just like this almost like redneck country bumpkin wearing like overalls, a flannel, and this sack. He's just super scary. And especially at the end when like the sack comes off and it's revealed that he's just like this deformed, long red hair having freakazoid, it's actually really scary and super effective. But that's why this ended up here on this list. I technically could move this one up even a little higher, but this is where it ended up for me this go round. Alright, and number 7 on my list goes to Roy, the imposter Jason from Friday the 13th Part 5, A New Beginning. This one was obviously portrayed by Tom Morga and Dick Wiend. I really love Part 5 as a movie, and I think like this look of Jason is super interesting. Like granted, it is an imposter Jason. He's wearing the hood, mask underneath the Jason mask. But what I like about it is that the chevrons on the mask are blue. And in hindsight, I'm sure the filmmakers were super happy they did that, because it really does be like, oh, that's the imposter Jason. Even the chevrons are a different color from the red. But I like this. I like how like the ear port like comes popping out. I like how Jason has like almost like a limp and is like a little slow, because it's obviously not Jason, it's Roy. But yeah, man, that's why it ended up on my list here, and I'll always have love for Part 5 and imposter Jason Roy. And number 6 on my list is also from Friday the 13th Part 5, A New Beginning, except the reason I'm having 2 on this list is because in Part 5 there is a dream sequence Jason that obviously Tommy Jarvis has like these visions of Jason Voorhees. Like you see him in the mirror at times, you see him looking out the window like this, and it's not wearing the blue chevron mask. It's essentially just like Jason himself in Tommy's vision. I think this is a really scary looking Jason, especially because the mask has just got blood on it, and it's just essentially like the look of Friday the 13th, the final chapter Jason. Granted, he's not real, he's just a figment of his imagination, but it is a very scary looking Jason, and that's why it ended up a little bit higher than the Roy version of Jason. And number 5 on my list goes to Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood's Jason. This one was played, obviously, by Kane Hodder, his first time playing Jason Voorhees in one of these films. I think this is obviously, like, people's favorite version of Jason, mainly because it is just insane looking. His spine is all exposed, there's, like, bones, and just, like, half his face and jawline is poking out from, like, the cracks in the mask. It is awesome. It is fantastic. Honestly, I could say this is my favorite on any other day, and especially just because Kane Hodder's performance as Jason in this one is awesome, and plus it just really does look like he's deteriorating and falling apart, and I think it's very terrifying. Why it ends up a little lower on my list than at the top is because once the mask is ripped off by Tina in the film and you get the reveal of what his face looks like, I just think he kind of loses all terror. He looks kind of silly looking, especially on the first reveal when he's just like, I think it's really silly looking, and it kind of takes me out and makes me less scared of Jason. But still, the look is great. Karl Buechler, the director, famously did a lot of Empire Pictures work, like with Troll and Ghoulies. So it almost has a little bit of his flair in there. But anyway, I love the look of this Jason, and I love Kane Hodder's performance as Jason, and that's why it ended up here on this list. And number 4 on my list goes to Friday the 13th, Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. This one, once again, is portrayed by Kane Hodder. I love the look of Jason in Jason Takes Manhattan. I love that the mask has like almost like the reversed chevrons on it. I like that because he was under the lake, he is just covered in slime and goo and like algae. He's just like constantly wet in this movie. I like that he's like almost like white and just essentially deteriorating before our eyes. I love it. Say what you will about the film, it is a little corny. I have mad love for it now that I've gotten older and can appreciate such cheese. I think the only time it loses me with the look of this Jason is, again, when the mask comes off at the end in the sewer and he's almost just like silly looking and he's like childish. They lose me with that shit, but I love the look of Jason in this one, and that's why it ended up where it ended up. And at number 3 on my look of Jason list is Friday the 13th Part 3 3D. I love this movie. I love Jason in this movie. He is famously portrayed by Richard Brooker, rest in peace. I love this Jason because it's the first time you get to see him with the hockey mask, and I also love that he is just brooding and hulking and huge and actually fucking terrifying. Very scary. I just really love it, and this look of Jason is just like, in my opinion, like how people picture the character. Like a everyday man, Lehmann, probably pictures Jason as Jason in Friday the 13th Part 3, and with good reason. He's terrifying, scary, and gigantic, and I love the mask in this one. It's clean, it's simple, there's no cuts in it or anything yet, so that's why it ended up at my number 3. And at number 2 on my list is, ironically, from my favorite Jason film of all time. It is Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives. Now, Jason in this one is played by CJ Graham. You know mine and Vicky's funny story and history with meeting CJ Graham if you watched any of our older videos. But I love the look of Jason in this one, man. It's the first time we get to see him undead as like this zombie Jason. He's like covered in like dirt and like just like wounds, and he's got fucking worms and maggots coming out of his head, you maggot head. And I love that he has like these yellow gloves and almost like Batman-like utility belt that he uses. It's fucking awesome, man. Granted, we don't know where the fuck he got all this shit, but he is just cool, and he's like almost like a hunter in this movie. I just love it, man. He's big, CJ Graham is huge, and him stalking around Camp Forest Green, don't call it Crystal Lake in this one. It's just great, and I've always loved this movie, and I've always loved the look of Jason. He's just actually scary. So, yeah, that's why it ended up as my number 2. And my favorite look of Jason Voorhees, and number 1 on my list, baby, is Ted White's performance as Jason Voorhees in Friday the 13th, Part 4, The Final Chapter. Ted White is a cinematic icon. His performance as Jason Voorhees in this is all time. He's fucking scary. He just looks like this normal everyday guy who's a psychopath, and I think that's why it's one of my favorite ever. I love that he's essentially got like long, greasy fingernails that are covered in dirt and are just gross looking, like when he's holding up that nurse against the wall and you see how fucking dirty he is, how he's got like the fucking axe wound in the top of his head. It's just awesome looking. And he's just scary, man. He runs, he is unaffected by like anything they're throwing at him, even a TV on his head at one point. But I just love the way he looks because it's before he's like a zombie and before it gets like a little too unbelievable. Tom Savini's like makeup work in this was spectacular. He really made Ted White look awesome and scary. I almost wish that Ted White got more shine as Jason Voorhees. He had more time to maybe play him in another movie. Granted, he didn't, and we got what we got, which was all great as well, but I think his performance as Jason in this is all time, and the look of Jason to me is the best, and that's why it ended up at my number 1. Alright guys, so that was my ranking of the looks of Jason Voorhees. What'd you think of how I laid them out? Did I do a good job? Anyway, I love these movies since I was a child, so I have a lot to say about a lot of this stuff, so if you want to check out those other videos, like I said, but that's where I ended up today. On any other day of the week, it really could be different just because I love this horror franchise. It's the only horror franchise where I actually like every single movie. New Jersey, baby. Let me know in the comments down below what you think of my ranking. Which ones would you swap out? Which ones would you change? And let me know also what movies you're going to be watching from the franchise this Friday the 13th. I'd love to know. Anyway, guys, it's always fun talking Friday the 13th and Jason Voorhees, so thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys very soon. And remember, don't have sex, don't do drugs, don't drink, don't go camping, don't do all that shit. But I'll see you very soon. Adios.
His body was never recovered from the lake after he drowned. And if you listen to the old-timers in town, they'll tell you he's still out there.
Fuck you, Bill.